Okay, so we are, or try to be, spiritual beings in a physical body, which also, although it is physical, is also part of being spiritual, or should be, or could be, while we are here. But this is not the case because we are in a artificial matrix type world. Anything that is not 100% natural is a matrix or artificial. You know, a city in itself is kind of artificial. Anything that involves technology is artificial. Anything that is not a direct creation of a human naturally is a technological creation and therefore artificial. That's stretching it to the limit because most of us wouldn't, I know myself, I wouldn't actually consider, like I might say, oh yes, it's technical, the internet and computers and mobiles and all that artificial technology that has, completely engulfed the earth and totally surrounds the earth in every area. We know that is technology, but we don't consider just any little mechanical thing a technological device either. But it actually is. And it has a frequency. Anything that makes a noise is a technological device. And of course, frequency can be used by any device. If I bang this table, I create a frequency, a negative frequency. That's banging in my head all the time, like if I'm bang, 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 that is a negative frequency. That brings my frequency down. So therefore, I am not operating at full capacity. And that's the case, of course, which is the point of the videos, to really express this as best I can, and I don't do it very well, I know. But that's the bottom line purpose, and unfortunately I keep repeating it, and probably to the same people who already know it, which is unfortunate. But then again, that's to be expected. And in fact, originally my videos were not really designed to talk about frequency because I was actually not 100% aware of frequency or the whole how it kind of worked a bit when I made my first video anyway, which is just over 12 months ago. So that's interesting too. But I was aware that there were negative forces in this matrix, and I became aware that it was a matrix, an artificial world, a controlled world, a, a non-random natural earth. It is not a random natural earth in any way, shape, or form, and in fact is a lot less so than what it even appears to be, because there are some aspects of it that are still natural, so we tend to be under the delusion that we're living in a natural earth. Like I say, if we were, then the human body, like I say, we're spiritual beings, but we're in a physical human body, which we tend to look down upon. But that is because this body is now in an artificial world at a low frequency because there's too much technology around, so that brings the frequency down. This can be deliberate or accidental, but as it's a matrix, it is usually all part of the big scope picture because it is ruled by a technological one-eyed God. When I say one-eyed, I mean one-eyed. You can take that whichever way you like. You can take it literally, but you should take it figuratively, because one-eyed is like my father used to say. This God entity only sees things from its point of view, which I suppose you would say is natural if it's a God. You would say, well, why wouldn't a God only see things from their own God-like perspective? Well, that's an interesting point. But that actually is probably not how I would see things. I would say, yes, you can have gods or a God entity, because we only one God rules at a time either way, even if there was more than one gods. I think that would be, unless they all combine and cooperate. And let's just say that the world represents the God, okay? Now, some might say, this is the confusion of this world, I think. I like to keep it simple. I don't buy into all the confusion. I refuse to, and I don't believe it. But many do. The vast majority believe in the confusion. The vast majority, because that is understandable, because the confusion makes sense. Just as all beliefs make sense, because there is always has to be truth, a lot of truth in any belief or any denomination or anything to get an intelligent human being to buy into it. That's how we all buy into everything, because we're not fools. We buy into something wrong because it is based in truth. If it was based in lies, we probably wouldn't buy into it. But, as I said before, if you're dealing with forces that have much more information than you, that have been around longer than you, that have suppressed suppressed most of what would be, like I say, with the human body, right? The human body is not meant to be as it is, and it is not meant to be even as a spiritual being. While you're here, I personally think that this human body is meant to be a great benefit, but in this reality it is not a benefit at all, because it does not function at anywhere near full capacity. Every ability has been suppressed. Every ability has been taken from the human. And instead it is given to the matrix and the God entity and its disciples, its demigods that we worship every day. Everyone you look up to, everyone you follow, you admire, is a demigod. Whether you know it or not, I was a demigod worshipper all my life, but I just wasn't aware of it. I knew that I looked up to certain people, and that I watched my movies, and I became quite obsessed with the characters and the actors. I knew it was a type of idol worship, but not consciously. I did it, and I knew that I looked up and even envied. Envy is a big part of this matrix. Envy is a big part of the God entity. I shall go back to my previous video, not the previous, the one before that, if I can, because that kind of sums up what has happened. Now, whether I've got the characters all right or the whole scenario, because it's all a fairy tale, doesn't change the reality, in my way of looking at it, that this particular Earth matrix is overseen or ruled, if you like, by a deity or a God entity, whoever or whatever you want to think it is, whatever name you want to put on this being. And it is not a human being. No, I would not think so. But human beings do worship, and are the many human beings could well be the vehicles for the God, the representations for the God, as I've said, on this earth, because this is how I see it. It's like this. I do not know the God entity. I do not know the deity. I have not seen this being, nor have I seen any other creators. I am in the dark. And that is how, it is meant to be in this matrix world. You're not meant to know what you are, where you come from, what you are meant to be doing, what abilities you may or may not have. You are meant to be of the matrix. The matrix is all about envy and idol worship. The matrix is always about chasing an elusive dream, never about like that moment on the beach with the Lulu Archon spirit doll, which actually wasn't a Lulu Archon. Well, it was an Archon doll, really. It wasn't a Lulu spirit doll. It was only a spirit because I gave it spirit, because I, because of my own childhood, made a friend or a spirit of the doll. But it was really just myself, and this is the whole point that I think is the reality in the matrix. And I only come to this conclusion by looking at the reality of the matrix, because if you want to, I do not know any of these gods. I do not know where we're cut off from everything, but we aren't cut off from the God that rules the world, because we have, its mind is exposed by the world that we live in, by those that are in the world at the moment, the vast majority, and those that we worship and that are most prominent in the world. They are the demigods, and they represent the God entity. Of course, they represent the seductive side. They represent the illusion side. They represent the side of worship and of love, because that's the only way you can get a human really to worship, is to seduce with the better qualities, I would think. You can get a negative human being to accept another negative entity quite openly. But if you want to get real humans to play the game, then you cannot seduce with negative qualities. It has to be wrapped in a positive demeanour, a positive vehicle, a positive package. Even if the package, is a duality God, serving a duality God. A duality God is a love-hate God. It's not an all-love God. But it can't be an all-hate God either, because human beings would never worship an all-hate God. But they can be seduced into worshipping a love-hate God, especially if it's wrapped the right way, especially if the reason for the hate or the negativity, is presented a certain way. It's a bit like I say, it's like saying, well, we must fight for peace, so we must be aggressive, we must be evil in order to get peace. We must be anti-life, we must kill in order to get peace. That I've said that before, and that's logical, and we've always done it. And this is how it kind of works in a basic way, which I think most people could probably get and say, yeah, well, that's true if you look down through the history. But either way, that's not the issue, if there is one, in the fantasy way of looking at it. But I don't think it's a fantasy, but I will say that the original story I did a video or two ago is a fantasy, because I don't know that for a fact, and I just happen to think that every fairy tale we're given is given from the Matrix and given from the entity that runs the Matrix. So therefore, there must be truth in it. There must be truth in the fairy tales. And either way, it fits a better scenario than most of what we already have. Now, I didn't put that very well. the entity that rules the Earth matrix, that governs the Earth matrix, that operates the Earth matrix. The Earth's God, if you like, because it has total dominion over this world, and has for a long time, I'm told and believe. It seems to fit. Now, and there's always been good and evil. And it's part of the game and the delusion to chase the peace and the love too, in a way. Because essentially, if every human being just had it inside of them, there would be no matrix. There would be no need for any of this, really, and that's the bottom line, and that's, even I know that, but, you know, I'm not capable of it either, because we don't live in a world that is conducive to every individual just being full of basic love. And I don't mean like going up to everyone on the street and kissing and cuddling them and all this sort of baloney that tends to get exaggerated and pushed around. No, it's just an acceptance of yourself and a peace in yourself. And it may or may not be expressed. You probably would have less need to even express it, but it would just be there. There would be no animosity, no ill feeling towards any other living life form, because it just wouldn't happen that way, you see. It's an ideal, I know, but it's meant to be how it actually was meant to be, I think. And it was just a natural way to live. And in a natural world where everything was abundant, where there is no competition, where there is no worship of gods. Now you might say, well, what happened to that? Well, in my fantasy, in my fairy tale, I just take it back to the video to go. Now this may or may not fit in with everyone else's thing, and I just make it up with bits of what some people would say is true, some people would say not. I mean, I don't know. But, you know, I'm going with that fairy tale, and I think it fits the world. And even if it isn't true, even if it is a fairy tale, it still fits the reality of this world, and I still think that most of what I say is valid, because look, this world right now, most of the human beings that are on the earth, and even those that have become less human, you know, like a psychopath or narcissistic, psychopathic types of people. Psychopath, I would use that word. It's a word I use a lot. I don't like it. I used to think it was 1 in a billion that would have been a psychopath at the most. This is not the case. But this mindset and the way most are operating on this world now is a representation of the controlling force, of what is behind this world. Because there is no direct contact now with any god or entity or deity at all. But this world represents what is behind it in the human beings, in the idols that we worship, in the way we have allowed the world to be, how we think about the world, the technology we have allowed to encase the world, the technology that we believe in and we worship, which is also a reflection of the God entity, because it is a one-eyed technological God. A one-eyed technological God, a one-eyed person is one that only sees things one way. There is only one way, the way, the truth, and the life. Even that is part of the God entity, because the matrix takes everything. See, it doesn't matter where things come from. It doesn't matter if something comes from a pure good source. It will be used by the matrix as part of its source. It's collective. It's a collective. The matrix is a collective of people, beings, whatever you like to call them, because they all have different personalities. Some people say that if you're very psychopathic, you've ceased to be human. Well, that's an interesting point. You certainly do not function in inward love and contentment in yourself. No, you are very much about taking from the world, and you do not particularly care for anything except yourself. So you can, if you're content in yourself, you probably, that's a self-love. But it's not a self-love that needs to destroy everything around it to feed itself like the Matrix does, and its minions and its disciples. They can't operate unless they feed off a human being. They can't be worshipped unless I worship them. They fall down, crash. You can't have a singer that doesn't have an audience. You can't make movies if I'm not willing to go and watch them. Which I do though, but you see what I'm saying. But either way, that's gone off the track. The human beings, or ones that look like human beings, because like I say, if your mind is not really human, if your spirit has been taken over, if you're possessed, you have ceased to be human. Or like I say, it can happen to the best of us. And I'm not the best of us, but I can get possessed very easily, especially when the Matrix is deliberately trying to open a portal so that I can be possessed. Because at low frequency, I don't want to be at low frequency. I don't want to be in the world I'm in, but I do not have the power on my own to change that frequency, because the frequency that comes against me is too great for me. It is too continual. It is too... they know me better than I know myself. While I'm still sitting here like I am now trying to figure out everything, when I realised there was a matrix and all this sort of thing, they already know that. They've already set the timelines. They already know what I'm going to know. And even if they don't anticipate everything correctly, which they probably do, but even if they didn't, they've still got everything in place to counter everything. Because this God entity is very intelligent. Not more intelligent than a human, and certainly not more intelligent than a human collective. That is not possible. But it is more intelligent than human beings now, including myself. Because we are operating under limitation. We do not have all the information and knowledge that this God entity has had. It has come directly from Source. It hasn't lost all its information. It hasn't lost all the knowledge. It knows the whole scenario. We are deprived in that. It has been gradually deleted from us down through the centuries and thousands of years, I would imagine. Because we don't really know anything. We only know what we're told by technology. Literally now too, that is the case. And what we're told by the Matrix, which is a set up, fake, stage reality. So that we play in this video game. If you follow, I've already said that. But you see, the Matrix God is a one-eyed God, in the sense that, like my father used to always say, oh, some people are one-eyed, he used to say. What he really meant was most people are. And, because that really means that you only see things from your own point of view. And this God entity does not see things from a human's point of view, does not see things from anything's other point of view except its own. And it's like its point of view is correct. I tell you, it's like it will tell you its story, and you better believe it. And many will anyway. Because if it's a God, and look, there is truth to it too. You see, you can have truth. You can tell a story about yourself like me. I could make excuses, and I have. I made excuse about possession with the dog. That's an excuse. I believe it was a reality. Well, the God entity believes his reality, his scenario too. But what is the real facts? Because don't forget that psychopaths and narcissists make everything up. They twist the truth. And they represent the God entity, because that's exactly the world that these people live in. Because they are not right. They are mentally ill. Because it's a reverse world. When I say mentally ill, I mean they are not sane. They are not rational. They're super intelligent. And they've made humans very unintelligent, not by making them, well, now with technology we make ourselves not even think, so that does tend to mean that the intelligence is low, but because the computer does the thinking for you. But aside from that, it is essentially about just keeping in the dark, of not knowing what abilities you might have, and not being in an environment that makes your body able to extend itself to where it can have abilities and see the truth and see the reality, and even physically do things that we now can't do, I would imagine. You know, because, and this is only on a idea that we are not using everything that the body was given and provided. It was meant to be used by the spirit as the human being was meant to be a representation of what it is at the full potential of a human. Okay, I'm going to go back to the video, not the last one, the one before. Maybe this fairy tale might put it in a fairy tale way to where I personally can get what I'm trying to say, because, you know, it doesn't matter what gods or names you want to put on things or what denominations. I'm not a religious person. As I've said before, I do not think that way, never have. But even I still have to face the facts, that just because I don't think that way, that doesn't mean that other people aren't worshipping things. And even I have worshipped false idols, so it's the same thing. If I want to make a piece of plastic like the doll an idol, or if I want to make another human being, or what appears to be another human being, an idol, even if that person is possessed, that person could be possessed. They could be possessed with an evil possession, not a good possession. But I wouldn't know that, because they could still look pretty. They could still present like the psychopath does. Not all psychopaths run around with a knife and say, I'm going to kill you. No, most of them don't. Most of them actually present a very good demeanour, but inside they want to destroy. They only want to take. But, you know, you're not going to get someone to like you or follow you or be caught up in your web if you present yourself as a psychopathic serial killer. No, you have to be packaged to me and seduce me in the form that I would, at a subconscious level, would have liked to have been, but with the way of turning me around though as well, because clearly, you know, this reality is not meant for humans to rise to their full potential. They are merely meant to feed the gods and the minions and the disciples, so obviously it's a very much a mind game, and then if they can't get you at the mind game, then it will become a physical game, because the body cannot defend itself anymore. My body cannot defend itself. If I was at high frequency, my body should be able to fight off all sorts of diseases, all sorts of attacks, whether they be... In fact, it's quite possible that at high frequency, the human being should be the super human being, the super man the superwoman, like I said in other things, but instead it will be presented to human beings that you can become super only if you go through the matrix, not as an individual human being. Because the matrix mimics everything that was originally meant to be, I think. Because that's why humans get seduced by it, because at a subconscious level they are searching for this. They know there's something there. They half know it. But instead they go for the matrix, because that's all they can see, because it's visible, because it's there in front of them, and it's there to grab them. How can they go for something beyond the matrix when they don't even know what it is? And they don't have the power in themselves because the matrix has depleted all their physical energy. How can I run from something? How can I run? Like if I feel fearful and I want to run from danger, how can I run if the matrix has depleted all my energy, if I'm exhausted? Because I'm living in an unnaturally, physically and mentally depleting environment. Then, that brings you down to nothing. Like I can barely make these videos. In fact, if I wasn't filled with so much negative energy from the matrix, I wouldn't make them. It's this is not, these videos are not being fueled by love or by or any enlightenment. No, I'm not one of your gurus that do all that sort of stuff. No, they're of the matrix. They're all of the matrix. They are at a higher level, but they are of the matrix. They are of the matrix. They show humans what they're meant to be, but they're like, be like us. The matrix is the superior being. The human that was meant to be the highest being is the lowest, and the matrix beings are the highest ones. If you look at it that way. So my videos are not fueled by love and high vibration like they should be, because that's right. It's like it's pathetical that you're making a video saying what a human being should be, and yet you're saying this is what we should be, but in reality, this is what we are. What I am here now, making a video fueled by the little bit of energy that I have after battling these psychopaths every day and the negative frequencies around. The little bit of energy that I have is basically negative energy. It's anger at the way that so much of the world has gone into a negative realm, and that people have too, because people are used by the matrix. The psychopath and the narcissist, I've said, is the key in some ways to the matrix in many ways, because their numbers are very great now. Humans, when I say humans versus psychopaths, I mean that, psychopaths are human too. They were born a human, but they have turned to the dark side, either intentionally or even unintentionally, just by the negativity has taken them over, the envy and the hate and the jealousy and the competitiveness that the matrix feels, because this is the matrix and this is how it thinks. This is how its collective thinks, and this is also how the one-eyed God entity thinks. Because that's going back to the video. I'm going to go back to the garden, if you like. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. I never believed it. I thought it was all fantasy. But I like the fairy tales. But now I'm saying, hey, there's more truth to the fairy tales. And even if they're not true, it doesn't matter, because they tell a good story. They're a good yarn. And to me, they make sense. I don't know how all this really come about, how it is now, right? Because my memory is not there for it. Maybe I'm meant to know, but I do not know. I barely know what my present existence is in the matrix. but I know there's a lot wrong. And I may not be the most positive person, but I can see when things have gone really dark. And that is because we have a dark, negative entity that rules. Because this being, I would say, if you go back to the Garden of Eden scenario, which I'm not even that familiar with, so I had to embellish it a little bit, okay? So don't take it literally, but take it as a story and make of it what you will. But, it's a very exhausting story. I haven't even started. I would like that it was written down for me, but instead I have to piece it together again because I wasn't going to actually do this. But look, at the beginning, although there is no probably beginning, as you can probably imagine, I mean, there is no beginning. There is no beginning and there is no end. There can't be. Not in my fairy tale anyway, but if you want to say there is a beginning or this or that, that's up to you. But either way, there has to be some point at which a human being was created. There was creation of sorts, like I've said before. So I went into that in that other video, but I'm going to go back to it because we have, like, supposing we have a creator that can create anything, everything, and does. That's putting it simply. You can use whatever term you want for that. That's okay. I don't know, because how would I know? You know, I might have ideas that I get from sources, but that's why I don't like to use the names too much, because names change over time. But it's quite possible that these are still the same beings, the same sources of life or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how to use the words to describe these things, as you can see. I don't. I'm ignorant and I don't have enough words for them even. But, really prefer to use examples. But that's why I'm using this story, okay? So we have a creator that can create everything. It creates all, okay? That's putting it simply. It has created many other beings. But it's never created one directly from itself. Okay, so we have the creator that has its most favoured, its most exalted child, creation. But not really a child, a creation, perhaps, because a child implies, although these days it probably doesn't, but that's because we live in a matrix, so terms. But generally, if something is of your flesh or of your body or your DNA, if you like, I don't know, I don't understand these things, or you're the same part of you, in a way, comes from you at a very basic level. Now, even that can be manipulated, I would think. Now, it's very confusing. But in this scenario, let's keep it simple. So we'll say that, like Pinocchio, the being was created separately from the master or from its creator or from its father. The father created a little boy made of wood called Pinocchio. Pinocchio was made by the father. He called himself Pinocchio's father because he created it, but it was not of his body. It wasn't a flesh body, it was a wood body. So it was different. Of course, I don't know these things and don't really, this is a fantasy. So, and it's the same with the story of the Garden of Eden and all that. It's a fantasy because we don't really know what these things consist of. We know what we consist of, maybe, but even that is limited because we don't know our full potential. We don't really understand ourselves. We only know what we're told about our body and our minds, etc. But the one-eyed God does know. He knows everything about us because he was there. Or should I say not he? Sorry about that. Sorry. This being, which is not a masculine form. No, it is masculine in a way. That's why I said it was more masculine many videos ago, before I had more information and before I really dwelt on it, because I don't understand those things, because I don't have all this information. You know, I've never looked into the different, anything really, you know. I have extremely limited information on even what most people would know, just in this fake matrix world, you know, like the different denominations, the different beliefs people have. I've never looked into any of them, you know, so, and I've never really had a denomination myself. You know, obviously, you know, you're aware of some, and you might be closer to some than others due to the cultural situation of your time, like your childhood, etc., etc. But you know, I hope you know what I mean, because I'm not putting it very well as usual. But anyway, the creator of all, or where creation started, it doesn't matter because it could be anything. But I don't want to make it technological. I stress this very strongly, even though many people would see it as not correct. And it doesn't matter because it's my fantasy and my fairy tale, okay? But I cannot stress enough that whatever was an original creation or original creator, whatever you like, technology played no part. Not technology as we know it. Technology is of the God of this world, and it is of its material, of its being. You say, you're probably saying, hey, she said she didn't know these gods or these things. Well, I don't, but I know what I see in this world. I'm saying that what is in this world represents its God. It has to. Just as if you take the Garden of Eden scenario, Adam and Eve were in the garden, I believe, I've been told, and, you know, at some point they left the garden and left their contact with what had created them, if they were created. This has to be, and this would be the case. So, you know, whereas now what we have on this world is a representation of the God that rules this world, and this is the technological being that was around then and was second to none, was God's number one favourite being, number one favourite creation, exalted to the highest. I can't use the words even. Admired by all, loved by all, until iniquity was found in it. That's if you take that passage, which I'd only heard not long ago. That means fault, negative, I guess, because this was not shown. And this is like the psychopath. A psychopath does not show its iniquity. It does not show its faults. It does not show its dark side. Neither does the God entity. But it is a dark being. And it hopes that humans will accept it in its true form at some point. Because I know myself in my life. One thing I always thought, particularly when I grew up, was it would be nice to just be able to be myself and be accepted as I am. Most people, normal people want that. But of course, most people are not normal. They now are of the matrix, so they don't present themselves as they are. And of course, if you are dark, why would you? Because you know that that will not be accepted. It won't get you friends. But even I was always like, yes, it would be nice to just be able to say what I thought and express myself, because actually I didn't think that I had a huge dark side, but I just was never, like in my particular circumstances, I wasn't actually like when I was younger, I was not actually, no one was interested, shall we say, without sounding like pity, 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 because that's like the God entity, all this sympathy, 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 pity, pity. Oh, I didn't get this, I was rejected, I was that. Look, this is all the matrix, and it all happens, but it has happened because the God entity wants you to know how it has been treated, or how it feels it's been treated, or how it thinks. But it won't give you the full facts of the story, though. It's like a lot of people. They will tell you a sad story about themselves or about certain things, but they may or may not give you all the correct facts. You know, when I talked about the dog and the possession in the video a few videos ago, I would not blame people if they looked at that video and said, she's just making an excuse for her being intolerant enough not to be able to deal with a dear poor old blind dog that, poos on the floor and wheezes on the floor every day. And she's saying that it's possessed and she's possessed because of the surroundings and because of the negative matrix, and that the dog also is infected and possessed, and therefore he is working against her. She knows that no one else does, and she really loves animals, so she would see it as the worst thing to harm the dog. But at the same time, the matrix is saying, we will delight if she can turn against the dog. And if she knows the dog is really not the dog, not really man's best friend, not really the dog that was originally there, or that, it's like when the old saying, someone said, when a dog becomes infected with rabies, the nicest dog turns into a monster and will destroy you. So it is like that, whereas she's like seeing the dog as a dear, innocent animal dog, but at the same time she knows that the dog is possessed with a negative spirit, with a negative possession, because the dog's frequency is low too. And also the dogs can be, you must remember we live in a technological matrix, and all animals are implanted or chipped. So it would be very easy to control an animal through a microchip. That's just a possibility. And the frequencies that we have going through with the technology. See, I don't understand these things, but like you'd say, why? Well, that is because, if a human being is going to raise the frequency, it has to be brought down. So therefore, every means will be used possible. Animals will be used. Technology will be used. Technology will be used on life forms. Because it's all a matrix. Everything is run by technology now because it's a technological God entity. But this technological God entity is one-eyed and negative towards human beings. Because if we go back to the story, it comes back to that story, you see. The God entity was the most exalted, the most high, in a realm that we shall call heaven, because that's the term that people use. But essentially it's not in the matrix. It's the original world, that is not this matrix that we live in now. It's separate even from probably Earth, even the original Earth, assuming the original Earth was meant for a human and was 100% natural, and a human being was meant for the earth and it was 100% natural, and everything on it was 100% natural and was not meant to be invaded by technology. But of course, it's a free will world. You see, as you have to say that you have to come from the viewpoint, which I'm going to do. I don't know if it's true, but in this world, we do not live in a free will world. We have our free will in our mind, if it's not too much taken over by the environment, which it mainly is, or too influenced or whatever, or even if it's taken over by another human being and that another human being doesn't really like you and wishes you ill, like you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you're in love with someone that basically does not love you at all. In fact, wants to bring you down because resents you, as the God entity resents human beings. And that goes back to the original fairy tale of the Garden of Eden and creation, where this being had the highest position in the entire all of everything and was loved by all, admired by all. The iniquity was that, kind of like, I suppose, if you have a child and you spoil that child so much because you just think the child is so beautiful. You just think the child is wonderful in every way. You don't realise that even the most beautiful and wonderful can have a few faults and could have a slightly dark side underneath it. But also, if you give that, you give that child everything but don't give it any good advice, or don't, I'm not there again, I've been guilty of this, and you think that, it's all love because you're a loving God, or you're a loving mother or a loving father or whatever. And you think it's okay to spoil and just give love. But, and that should be the case, but it could perhaps happen that then the child starts to think that it is above you and that you do not matter so much because it's been, and then what if everyone else says the same thing? This being was like this in this position, to where it was something special, but it's kind of like the old saying, things can go to your head. Well, it might have went to its head. Now, it might have said, well, it didn't go to my head because this is what you've told me I am. This is how you've admired me. And, it's an interesting story. And it's very hard to actually put holes in it, in the sense that there's merit to everything. But, I just tell the story. And you have to say, well, is it correct? And is it right? Is it, then when Adam was created, Adam was the first man, evidently, okay? So that's the name. So it's okay for me to use a name here because that's how the story or the fairy tale goes, whatever. Adam was created. I haven't given a name to the other being, to the non-human being. Now, how technological this being was back at that time, at the creation of, say, the first human, Adam, I do not know, because I surmise that technology can become addictive, and that, like ourselves, the more technology we have, the more technology we get. So the more we incorporate it, the more stronger we use it. We go from one form of technology into a higher form or a stronger frequency, if that's correct, and I don't even know what I'm talking about as usual. But, if you get my gist anyway, it doesn't matter if I'm not factual or scientific, because how can I be? I don't know those things. But, you would go more along that line, and, whereas originally maybe not so much, but I do not know this. But I do know it was not human and not of the creation, okay? That's how the story goes. I'm sorry if I'm shouting, but My ear is all blocked up, so it's rather hard for me to present. I'm a bungler at the best of times, as you know, and I'm getting worse with the videos, whereas I know there again, even with these videos, if I was at a higher frequency and in a more relaxed, conducive environment, a normal, what I would call a even remotely normal environment, even environment of before 3 years ago when the matrix kind of opened itself up, shall we say, because even then it was still a city, so it was still a matrix, but it was not negative. Now it's turned negative, real negative, whereas before that it was just natural negative, if you know what I mean. So it was small negative. And actually, it didn't make me feel too negative. But that's like everything else. You can say, well, I don't mind a bit of technology. I don't mind a bit of traffic. But if that traffic starts to become aggressive, if everyone's beeping their horns, if everything is making more of a commotion, if it's a bit like in the movie Jewel, which I only saw about 2 months ago. I'd seen it years and years ago and caught up with it on the YouTube. They had actually had a copy, a movie called Jewel, where it's just this single human man. And I say human man because I didn't get this when I first watched it. When I first watched it, I just saw it as a simple movie of this man that was mysteriously stalked and harassed and threatened, and his life was in danger by this great big truck, and he's just going home, across this countryside type of thing, and this truck starts stalking him and basically showing that it is going to harm him. And so that's just an example of technology, this big truck being used to threaten this human in his car, and is going to prevent him from making his journey home safely. But I would say that now seeing it, when I first saw it, it was just like this man being mysteriously harassed and threatened by this truck driver with this great big truck for no apparent reason. That's how the movie plays out, and you wonder why, because he doesn't know him, and even he can't figure it out. But at some point he realised that his life's in danger, and that that this truck has malicious intent. This truck driver and his great big vehicle truck has malicious intent against this innocent human being that wonders what's going on, cannot get it even. But now when I watched it, only a few weeks ago, after all those years, I saw it in a slightly different light, in the sense that I immediately said, hey, look, he's in a matrix. He doesn't know he's in a matrix. He doesn't know that it's not just the truck. It's a total matrix. All the people that he went to for help, and the people when he pulled up at the cafe to get coffee and was trying to get away from the truck driver, he didn't realise that they also were connected to the truck driver. They were the minions of the matrix. He didn't know that. He didn't get that. He thought it was just the one truck driver, and even that was lethal for him. But that's an example also of technology, of a truck being used as a weapon, because that was really not like technology as we think of it. It wasn't supernatural type of technology or fancy technology. It was just a simple big truck with the intention behind it to harm another human being. At any rate, I just saw that movie and it occurred to me after seeing it. But because once you come from a certain standpoint, you say we live in a matrix, there are those that are for the matrix and those that are not of the matrix. Just because, like myself, you're not of the matrix, although I am in the matrix and used by the matrix and controlled by the matrix and made to feel at low frequency by the matrix, I'm not consciously of the matrix, whereas many are actually conscious worshippers of the matrix and its minions, its disciples. I worshipped the disciples of the matrix directly, but I thought they were just human beings. I didn't know they worshipped a god. I didn't know, therefore, you know what I mean? I didn't know that it was a matrix and that it was like that. So, you know, and even that is wrong, because you shouldn't really, you know, you can admire something a bit, sure. But see, that's what happened in the original story, was that the admiration of the second to none being that was created by the Creator, that admiration ended up going into a type of idol worship by some around him, to where that being became more enticing, more interesting, more, I can't use the words, more, appeared to be superior to the actual creator of that being, to some. You know, because you can worship anything, and if something, it's a bit like the Garden of Eden. Like I say, it's like that scenario, if we go back to that fairy tale. Adam was put in the Garden of Eden, or the earth matrix, well, it wasn't a matrix then, it was a natural earth that would have benefited Adam. It was the environment was created as a perfect world for this being called Adam, which was like a child of the Creator because it was more natural, more organic. If you want to use those words, I don't even know what the words really are, but it was different to technology. It was different to the technological being that now, that now has this world. It's a different world. It's changed. For whatever reasons, I'm not going to go into that, and I don't know that I fully know it, but, I might have my ideas, but I'm just going to go back to the fairy tale because I like to keep it simple, and it makes a point better if I'm even making a point. And I'm very sorry to be like this making a video because yes, I am a poor representation of a human being. This is right. I make a video about being a spiritual being, enlightenment and all this sort of stuff, and I am a poor representation. The good representations are those of the matrix because that's how it works. Would you listen to someone or follow someone if they are there angry and they're saying they get possessed and they say they're at low frequency and their health is bad and they're physically depleted and they're aging vastly? Would you take a recommendation from that person? Would you follow any of their advice? Would you believe anything they had to say? Would you, if they said to you, if you do take certain things, you can improve yourself a bit? No, you wouldn't, because you say, well, look at you. But I might say, well, yes, look at me, but my circumstances might be different to yours. The matrix will probably eventually expose itself to everyone 100%. But then by that time, most people will be of the matrix. They already are, of course, but what I'm saying is that, if you allow yourself to become low frequency, or if the matrix contributes to that happening, see, there again, it depends on your viewpoint. Some people say it's all up to the human. Well, I say it should be, but, and that's absconding responsibility, I know, by saying, well, it should be, but it isn't, because the matrix has too much authority, has too much control, has too much dominion over the world. It doesn't have too much, it always has had, it's its world. But, because of the way things are now going, the negative aspect is like well, we want our matrix world, so those that are not of it or who can't fit into it, who can't be a successful cog in the matrix to keep that wheel going, because it's like a big wheel, it's like a big mechanical brain, you could say, a negative brain. But it's still like a mechanical device that needs certain cogs to keep it going. But if you're a cog that they can do without, because they say, oh, that cog will perhaps be too faulty for us, will cause us too many problems. That cog does not fit this matrix well enough. It belongs in another matrix, or it certainly don't belong in ours. We don't want it. The God entity doesn't want. You've been a useful cog up to now, but we don't want you anymore because our matrix is changing now. And also you've changed, because maybe you see the matrix as too negative, and our God is the dark prince, not light. But of course, those that worship will see the dark as the light, because they will see that scenario story that I've just mentioned in a different way. You know what I mean? It depends on which way you want to see the fairy tale. It's a bit like in Snow White, right? I've mentioned Snow White a lot of times. See, in that story, in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the queen was the god entity. That queen was the god entity, the deity that rules this world. That fairy tale comes from the god entity. This entity is the queen, the very strong, dominating, beautiful, seductive, but also duality queen. Love-hate. Be a good servant, be a good subject, admire, continually tell the queen, yes, you are the fairest in the land, queen, you are the most beautiful of all, and we worship you, and everything is okay. This queen had a certain look. She was beautiful, but she was also very strong and very hard, and very dominating and very powerful, and very I don't know. I only know the pictures from the fairy tale, but we all know what the queen looked like. There's even now they have some movies that are representations of it. I would say that the one I saw a fair while ago was very similar to that. The actual image was very similar to my old Snow White fable or fairy tale, Millicent or whatever it is, very much like that. Whereas Snow White was very soft and cute and innocent and gentle and kind and loving and sweet and adorable and universal love, you could say, but in a very different package altogether. But that package now is not as desirable as the Queen's package. If you look at the world now, we would admire the image of the Queen more than what we would the image of Snow White like we used to. Because Snow White was always the good one in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The wicked Queen was the evil Queen, and she even showed herself as the evil, wicked witch, the horrible old lady with the wrinkled up face and the one tooth, and when she gave Snow White the poisoned apple. Snow White was so innocent. She actually, this is interesting, that humans don't want to see sometimes the unpleasant truth, because even Snow White, she was not an unintelligent. It's just that she was so full of love, she didn't suspect the world of being full of a duality, negative reality. So she took that poisoned apple from not just the wicked queen, which would have been understandable because she didn't know the queen had turned against her out of jealousy and envy. The queen didn't really have anything personally against Snow White, but she just couldn't stand that others would see that she was, well, when the mirror told her that you, queen, are very beautiful, but no, Snow White is the fairest of them all. She is better than you. Sorry. You've been surpassed. and the queen could not take that. And the being that was at the beginning with the Creator could not stand Adam being created. And then when Eve was created, because this being befriended Adam, Adam liked the being, got on with him, accepted him, even gave him some admiration, as I say. But when Eve came along, that was too much, because she was incomparable even in beauty, whereas, this being still had its great physical persona, which was enticing, as the queen was too. She was beautiful in Snow White. She was beautiful, but in a much different way to Snow White, not in an authentic, soft, kind, sweet, genuine kind of way. It was a powerful image. It was a different type of beauty, and it demanded admiration. Snow White did not demand admiration. Snow White didn't care. She just lived in herself as an authentic human being in love. The queen only gave love if she was given admiration. If you didn't give her admiration, even the mirror she would turn against the mirror when it told her that Snow White was the fairest of all, because the mirror could not lie. So she couldn't help but go to the mirror, because she wanted the truth, because she wanted to know that she was the one and all, and she wanted to make that a reality. As this being wanted to make it a reality that it was the most magnificent of all. But it wasn't satisfied with just the admiration that it was given or a bit of love from that. It got to the point where it needed the whole caboodle, shall we say. If you want to look at it that way, I would say that's what probably happened in this fairy tale, because it's a bit like the queen. Like, the queen could have easily just let Snow White exist, even after knowing that she was fairer than her, because Snow White never really was a threat to the queen. Snow White never wanted to be Queen of the land. Snow White didn't want power. Snow White didn't want vast subjects bowing down and worshipping her. But she still just was envious that this was an authentic, original human being. And the queen was like the other being in heaven that was created, but was not of that being. It was different. And it became envious and felt that there was a competition when Adam was created, and then when Eve came along, it was the final straw, shall we say. The final nail in the coffin then. Then the anger and the rage and the jealousy and the contempt for the Creator came in. Why did you do this? Why have you ruined my world? Not only was I second to none, but many thought I was better than you, better than my very Creator. And now I'm relegated to third spot, literally. So, what do? I befriended Adam, and so I still kind of held my spot in a way. But now you have created a mate for this Adam, a being called Eve, a so-called woman, and her beauty is beyond compare. I cannot compete with that, because I have half of that, but I don't have the full thing. So now, I think I'm going to have to fold up. I think that's the matrix calling, as they say, one way or another. Perhaps it's, because that's right, we all are restricted by time and whatever, but just let me finish up a little bit here and I'll get back to it. I've wasted another video here, haven't I? I'm sorry. But at that point, the being wanted to then find a way to get back its position somehow, or to rectify a wrong, and was angry, resentful, had contempt for the Creator and for Adam, and especially for Eve, because there was no way that this being was going to compete with this very beautiful being. You know, it was just something that, and also Adam then, of course, transferred all the admiration or the friendship or all that it had with this being, even though it was not of its kind. So it was understandable that Adam should go with his own kind, this beautiful woman that was given to him. Of course, because it was like cats don't go with dogs, but they will if there's nothing else around, you know, that type of thing. That's not a good example, but but either way, he probably would have still been friends with this being. But it's a simple iniquity in the being, really, of wanting to be the soul and the be end of all of everything. Because really, you know, you can't expect, I wouldn't think, to be the mate of someone that is a different species, and yet this was the expectation. But either way, that's what happened, and this being couldn't deal with it. It was like, I've got to then somehow get rid of Eve. But obviously they can't just get rid of at this point. But I can no longer, if Eve says something, Adam will go along with it, because Adam is smitten with Eve, and that is his mate now. So the only window of opportunity for changing anything at all would have to be through Eve. Now Adam liked the Creator and liked this being and adored Eve. Eve was what he now focused on the most, because it was just made him just so happy to have one of his own kind to and to propagate with as well, etc. Now, so Adam on his own would have, if I would say that Adam, if he was given a choice on his own, he would have stayed with the Creator and with Eve. And the being knew this. He was like, if it comes down to it, if there has to be choices made here, and this being is demanding that choices be made. So this is like the God entity of this world. Like I say, everything represents him everything represents this being, not him, but it presents as a more masculine force in many ways. But it is not a masculine being. Adam was a masculine being. Adam was a man. You know, a separate man. This being is a duality God. But when you get aggressive and angry and you want to fight and you want to wage war, that tends to be more what we would associate with a masculine trait. You know, but it is not a masculine, but it doesn't necessarily mean, because you can still be of that way, even if it's only a part of yourself, just as I can become possessed and turn into a monster, you know, so it's like that, unfortunately. But at any rate, you know, the only way to upset the cart, shall we say, would naturally be for the being to get Eve to turn against the Creator and leave the garden and go with him, go with the being, a substitute male, but a bit like a marriage being broken up by a mistress or a trickster, a seducer. I mean, it can be authentic in reality, where you might have made the mistake of marrying someone that's not you're 100% mate, and then you meet someone else and think, oh, well, this is a mistake. I perhaps made the wrong choice. But this is not the situation here, because the being, the second to none being, the technological being that now rules this world, it did not like Eve. It did not love Eve. So it didn't fall in love with Eve, and lo and behold, unfortunately, Eve is with Adam. It wasn't like that at all. This being didn't like Adam or Eve, really. But it was prepared to tolerate and accept Adam because he did not pose too much of a threat, shall we say, or didn't make the being look less. So the only way was then for the being to seduce Eve, shall we say, which is what the story goes. And it's very interesting that you can seduce someone like the psychopath can do, can actually dislike you, despise you, want your destruction, but can sometimes lead you to follow the psychopath, maybe even fall in love with the psychopath, could even happen to some people, and not see that this being, this psychopath, really does not love you at all, does not want you to reach your full potential in any way, and actually wants to bring you down and wants to dominate you and you to worship the psychopath or the God entity, because this is the mindset. This is the mindset. It's all about sacrifice. You have to sacrifice your abilities, your position as a human being. You have to be less as a human being in order that they be more, or the God entity be's more, which is going back to the original scenario, whether you believe it or not. It's a fantasy, but gee, it fits this world very well. And it's a good example anyway. It's a good fairy tale and a good example. I'll have to get back to it again. I'll have to close off because, as I said before, the Matrix is calling, and also I do feel very unpleasant. I don't feel quite right at all. You know, it's very hard to be shouting video, especially when you're already feeling negative. See, theoretically, I could make a video even if I was angry, because when I first started making the videos, I was angry. You know, I felt that it was a negative world, but I still thought I can put it across in a way that shows it without coming across as though, yes, we're all infected with such negativity. Because if you want to point things out to people who have not stooped to the low negative level that I now have, or have been brought down to, depending on how sympathetic you are to it, you know, that's what I say. It's sympathy for the devil. I've heard that thing. That's a song. And that's very much like in this world with the God entity too. You can sympathise with the situation. I have known psychopaths all my life. I have sympathised with them. I have went along with them. I've tried to understand them. But they have not been remotely interested in understanding me, or remotely interested in letting me be myself, or attain any sort of peace or harmony in myself. They're not interested in that. They want you to follow them without question, total loyalty, total subservience. You know, and it doesn't matter if you at times will show that you're better than them, or that you have some ability they don't have, or if you have an idea that might be better than theirs. That is irrelevant. They are not interested. They are God, and they know it all. And even if they were infinitely less than you, as many psychopaths are a lot less than a lot of their victims, that will not matter the least. In fact, it will make them more angry, more inclined to want to bring you down to their level and lower. That is the name of the game in this Matrix reality. That is the name of the game. That is the video game we play. We play with these people. They are everywhere. They are all around. They are our friends. They are our family, they are our lovers, they are our teachers, they are our preachers, they are our idols, they are our entertainers, they are our comedians, they are everything that we want and need or think we do. But they are not of us, they do not really serve us. We are there to worship them. And we do. And we can't really do anything else. And there's no reason we wouldn't, because once you are brought to a very low level yourself, then everything else does appear to be better. So that's the case too. And also, even if you can see that something isn't better, if they have more physical power, if they have more numbers, if they have, like I say, that man in Jewel that was just trying to go home, he had a fast car. He should have been able to actually outspeed that great big giant truck on a few times. In fact, in that movie, there were a couple of scenes where he said, now I can escape, now I've got him, because I think that he has to go into low gear and has to be slow. That's what it said in the movie. And I should be able to overtake and get away. But he didn't understand that that truck driver was fanatical, obsessed, and that was prepared to go to no end to defeat him. So actually, whenever he thought that he did have the upper hand, he didn't. And his car could not, even though it could go over 100 miles an hour, which was a lot back then when the movie was made, and the truck theoretically should have had great trouble going at that speed. In reality, it was able to do that because the driver was prepared to drive that truck any way to defeat the human being in the car. You know, have a look at the movie anyway. It's actually a good movie. It's a simple movie. I like things simple, but even that was still more complicated than when I first saw it, even though I enjoyed it originally, because it was, in many ways, it was negative versus positive. I think the fella in the car represented a normal, regular human being, innocent, and not seeing any danger around, not seeing any negativity. Because back then the Matrix wasn't as closed as what it probably is now either, but still, it's always been a matrix for quite a long time. It's just that, like I say, the Matrix can bring in more technology to where you become aware that it's more of a system or more of a, but like I say, that truck driver was part of the Matrix. He was a negative force working against that human that was just innocently trying to go home, if you want to look at it that way. Anyway, that's it. I better go because I'm getting in trouble here. Okay, I shall try to finish up the video some other time.